everybody. Great to see you. Welcome to St. Clement's. Nice to see you all. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at, obviously, you've worked out by now, this examination of St. Mark's Gospel is not going a reading of it, starting at the beginning and going through to the end, but rather it's a more thematic approach, which I think is a lot more interesting than doing starting at the beginning and working through and so on and so forth. Because this way, one is given certain tools, mental tools, which will help you understand the whole thing. At least that is the idea. Now, what I want to do in this session, you've got a cheat sheet, is look at some of the miracles of Jesus that were not miracles of healings. So there are lots and lots of miracles in St. Mark's Gospel. In fact, St. Mark's Gospel is largely a list of miracles, a description of miracles, but these miracles are there, and they're rather strange because they are not healings of people who are sick or anything like that. Now, the most obvious one is the calming of the storm. And you can see it there. On that day, as evening drew on, he said to them, "Let us cross to the other side." Leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was, and other boats were with him. A violent squall came up, and waves were breaking over the boat, so it was already filling up. Jesus was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. They woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Quiet, be still." The wind ceased, and there was great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you terrified? Do you not yet have faith?" They were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this whom even wind and sea obey?" Now, one of the usual things about the healing miracles is it's said that Jesus heals people in order to elicit the faith of the person who's healed, or to reward the faith of the person who's healed, and also to elicit the faith of the onlookers. In other words, the miracle of healing is a demonstration of power, and therefore something to arouse the faith of the crowd, and in fact turn the crowd not into a crowd, from a crowd into a congregation. Here, it's clear what's happening. The disciples panic, and they say, "Do you not care that we are perishing?" They think they're going to drown. The water, well, it's true the boat is filling up. They've got some sort of justification in thinking they're going to drown. And it is night, after all, which doesn't help. Drownings or sinking of ships are always worse at night, aren't they, than during the day? Have any of you been on a sinking ship? No. Yeah, it'd be really horrible. I mean, the most horrible one was obviously the Titanic, which happened at 2 a.m. I mean, that's just awful, being woken up in the middle of the night and then realizing the ship is sinking. This one too. I mean, Jesus was asleep, and the storm was going on around him. They woke him up and said, "Do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Be quiet, be still." The wind ceased, and there was great calm. So Jesus is the Lord of the waves, the wind. He has this power, miraculously, to create calm in the midst of a storm, because he is the Son of God. He is God. So this miracle is a claim to is a demonstration of his divinity, it seems to me. Then he says to the disciples, and we're only in chapter 4 here, 4:35 to 42, he says to the disciples, "Why are you terrified?" Answer, "Because we thought we were sinking." Wouldn't you be terrified if you thought you were going to die? Well, yes, of course. "Why are you terrified? Do you not yet have faith?" Now, this is interesting. The disciples have seen some of the miracles Jesus has done before this, but their faith is incomplete. Faith is a process. Gaining faith is a process. Now, this, of course, is rather interesting. One of the things that is often that very famous hymn, that very famous hymn, it does actually contain a heresy. It says, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, and now I'm found. Something, something, something. Blind, but now I see. And then what's the second verse? It's on the hour I first believed. It contains that word, the hour I first believed. In other words, that the faith can be pinpointed to a particular hour. Now, again, you remember what we saw with the centurion at the foot of the cross. He said, truly, this man was Son of God. So the centurion, you could say, as they love to say in certain circles, came to faith at 3 p.m. on Good Friday. And then, of course, you've got St. Paul on the road to Damascus, who is temporarily blinded and so on and so forth. And he came to faith on the road to Damascus. However, could it not have been with the centurion and with St. Paul that it was a gradual awakening? And in fact, the moment on the road to Damascus and the moment at the foot of the cross was in fact the culminating moment of a process in which faith was growing. I don't know if people who become religious believers, having previously been atheists or agnostics, I don't really know how they come to faith, but I do think it's something gradual and it's something that they maybe fight against for many years. So Jesus is saying, look, do you not yet believe? And the answer that they could give to him is, well, we're on the way. It's a process. We are moving in the direction of faith. Now, this is important. A lot of people, I would imagine, they never talk about it, of course, but a lot of people who come to this church maybe believe, but how can I put this? There are many areas in which their faith has not fully penetrated. Have you heard of Heineken? Reaches the parts that other beers cannot reach. So you have a Heineken and it totally saturates you, correct? Okay. However, you have any other beer and it's just, it doesn't quite have that full-on effect. I don't know if you are a coffee addict, when you haven't had a cup of coffee for some time, i.e. when you get up first thing in the morning, you have the first cup of coffee and you feel it hit your bloodstream. Have you had that experience? Clearly no coffee addicts here. Those of you who have been heroin addicts will probably have experienced something similar. Now, faith, all saturating faith, is what we want, but what we're living with is a faith that maybe doesn't saturate us fully. Do you not yet have faith? Well, yes, we do have faith, but we also have lots of unfaith in us. And the faith is struggling with the unfaith. And that is why, even though we're all believers in Jesus Christ the Lord, who is asleep on our boat, at the same time, when it gets rough and windy and so on, we start panicking and we think we're all going to die, which is clearly not the reaction of people of faith.
But then he was asleep.
Yeah.
And so they.
Yeah. Do you think when God goes to sleep, somehow or another, the whole world therefore goes funny? Yes, I know what you mean. But the truth of the matter is, did they look upon him purely as a a miracle worker, or did they realize that they were all in the hands of God? And therefore, we don't need to worry about anything. There's a famous Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, isn't there, when something awful is about to happen, and this pious lady says to the child, "Let us pray." And they're on a boat, I think, going down to the Amazon or something. And Arnold Schwarzenegger said, "I don't think so. Let's get and he does something like grab a gun or run out on deck or something like that. So you know what I mean? The truth of the matter is, we have trust in God. Therefore, we take action because we've got trust in God. We don't just sort of say, do nothing, but we have trust in God. But do you not yet have faith? Why are you terrified? Terror and faith don't go together. Terror and faith are in opposition. Yet we've got to recognize in us both are present. We all have fears. We all have terrors. Now, the reader who's reading this has faith, which is maybe growing exponentially, and he also has she has terrors. And maybe when the faith conquers the terror, that's when he or she will come to complete faith and want to be baptized. Because don't forget, in those days, quite possibly, getting baptized was like a self-imposed death sentence. Okay, now, they were filled with awe and said to one another, who then is this whom even wind and sea obey? Now, again, it doesn't say, well, this is the Son of God. We all know that. No, they say, who then is this? They are discovering who Jesus is. So it is a gradual process. They are discovering who Jesus is. And that is why you are reading the book, to discover who Jesus is. Who is Jesus? Well, you'll know by the end of the book. And the punchline is, truly this man is Son of God.
Do you know what, though? It just goes to show how human Christ was. I mean,
Yeah.
You watch Jesus of Nazareth,
Yeah.
which is beautiful. I mean, it's a great
Yeah.
Robert Powell.
Yes.
I mean, he's so divine. I mean,
he is divine. Yes. Okay. Yes, and a lot of people criticised the film from that point of view. They said it was too much, it was too pietistic or something like that. It was whereas if you look at the other, what's supposed to be the greatest film ever made about Jesus, which is the Gospel according to St. Matthew by Pier Paolo Pasolini, who was a Marxist and an atheist. That one, the Jesus is very human, and that is the greater film, I think. Have any of you seen it? It's well worth seeing. All right, for me, the greatest film about Jesus is, you'll be appalled when I say this, is Jesus Christ Superstar. The one made in the 70s, early 70s. Do you remember? Do you remember the early 70s? No, but it was great. Don't diss the early 70s. It had lots of 70s music and 70s dancing, and things like that, and sort of 70s costumes and so on. But I thought that was superb. I really did think that was superb.
I think The Chosen's done a good job.
I haven't seen The Chosen.
No, but it shows him very human.
Yeah. The other one, which I think is one of the greatest things, are portrayals of our Blessed Lord on celluloid, is in fact Ben-Hur, even though he only appears in the background. That is superb, Ben-Hur. And I think that was that made by, I can't remember who made Ben-Hur. Also, The Robe is very good, I must say. Those great Hollywood movies of the 50s and 60s and so on were very, very good. But I thought Jesus Christ Superstar was fantastic, even though...
It's the Lloyd Webber one.
Yeah.
It was done for children.
No, that was that's Joseph and the Multicolored the Dream Coat. That was done for children. That's not so. I mean, that's okay, but it's nothing special. But whereas Jesus Christ Superstar is very special. And the other thing, of course, is it's written by, I think they were both Jewish, weren't they? I think they're both Jewish or atheists or agnostics or something. Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. No, they aren't? No. No.
Robert's father ran the Royal College of Music.
Yeah. Okay. Well, does that mean he was an Anglican then? Okay, right, yeah. Okay, whatever. But the point is, it's not written from, this is a good point. Jesus Christ Superstar is not written from a religious perspective. And I think that's very important because it delivers a very religious and uplifting film. Whereas the Zeffirelli one, Zeph, was very, very devout. And it was written from a religious perspective. And I think possibly it overdoes the religion and it sort of collapses in on itself. Now, you see, the point of the matter is faith is incremental. It's a bit like learning French. You have to practice at it. It's a practice over time. It's not a one-off moment. Now, what this means is, of course, we are Catholics, not Protestants. A Catholic is constantly trying to believe more than he or she believes at present. A Protestant will say to another Protestant, "Are you saved?" And the other one will say, "Yeah, yes." And in other words, it's either or. There's a line you cross, and we don't believe that there's a line you cross. We do believe that there's a line you cross in moral matters. We can say that's wrong, that's right, and we can be definite that the line exists between right and wrong, though it's sometimes hard to know where that line is. Whereas, of course, many of our Anglican brethren find that very difficult to believe. In fact, they don't believe it at all. They think everything is a grey area. It's not true. Some things are not grey. Okay? Okay, now, who is this? So they ask themselves, who is Jesus Christ? Which is what the question the whole Gospel of Mark is putting to the reader. Who is Jesus Christ? And it's also the question that's being put to you every time you think about your faith, your life, and so on. Who is Jesus Christ? I mean, that is the one question, probably the one question that you will be asked when you are in front of God at the last judgment. So, who is Jesus Christ? And you say, well, I think he was a man. And you do get a lot of nonsense on that question. He was a great thinker, or he wasn't a great thinker. He was a great teacher. Okay, well, what is his teaching? No, he is the Son of God, is the answer to that question. Who is Jesus? And you have these people like great soul Gandhi, the Mahatma, saying, I can't remember what the Mahatma said about Jesus Christ, but he said some nice things anyway. But he denied the divinity of Christ. And of course, you do get Marxists who will say Jesus Christ was, a great guy, but they will deny that he was the Son of God. Okay, so that's the calming of the storm. The storm, I suppose, there is a temptation to interpret this little incident allegorically in the storms of life, etc., etc. No, not really. There was a storm, and they panicked, and so on and so forth. And you're constantly being asked by the challenges of life, who is Jesus Christ? Today's the Feast of the Mexican Martyrs, and many of them were living nice lives. And then suddenly this ghastly government came to power and started to persecute them. They had to ask themselves, well, who is Jesus Christ? Some of them hopped it to the United States. Some of them conformed with the government. Some of them became atheists. And the way they did that was by getting married. We won't shoot you if you get married. He said, okay, fine. The horrors of marriage are slightly less troubling than being shot, so I will get married. But some went underground and then were shot. And because they were the ones who said, well, who is Jesus Christ? He is the Son of God. And therefore, I will go underground. I will minister to the people. I will say Mass in secret. And I will take the risk of being shot or being arrested and shot. And there were quite a lot of them who were arrested and shot as a result. In Jalisco alone, I think about 80 priests were shot, maybe 120, I can't remember. In Guerrero and in Chiapas, every single priest was driven out. The ones who stayed were all caught and shot. Whereas, of course, in Mexico City, they did shoot somebody in Mexico City, Father Miguel Pro, Saint Miguel Pro, and the day of his shooting, which was an illegal shooting, it was done by the government in the government prison, there was a general strike in Mexico City. And after that, they didn't try it again in Mexico City. Okay, so who is Jesus Christ? And Father Miguel Pro gave a resounding answer. He said, he is the Son of God. And of course, Father Miguel Pro and all the other ones who were shot, as they were being shot, they shouted out, long live Christ the King, which really cheesed off their tormentors. And that is why they tortured poor Saint Miguel del Rio, Jose del Rio. He was tortured because he kept on shouting out, long live Christ the King. They were very, very cross. And so they did the most horrible things to him, and then they shot him. He was 14 years old, which is amazing, isn't it? But that's leftists for you, okay? Yes, that's the Freemasons for you. That's the forces of progress for you. Okay, now let's go on to the next one: the feeding of the 5,000 and Jesus walking on the water. This is chapter 6. 35 to 52. By now it was already late. Another day coming to an end. And the disciples approached him and said, this is a deserted place, and it's already very late. Incidentally, these time indications are, to me, They don't bother to tell us the date, which is infuriating from our point of view, but they do tell us the time of day, which is interesting. They think, did this really happen? Oh yeah, I remember it was getting late, wasn't it? Oh yeah, we were all worried because it was getting late. That has the ring of truth in it. Because nobody would put that in if they were writing a fictional story. This is the deserted place. It's already very late, and it's a deserted place. There's nothing around. It doesn't actually say where it is though. Dismiss them so they can go to the surrounding farms and villages and buy themselves something to eat. He said to them in reply, "Give them some food yourselves." But they said to him, "Are we to buy 200 days' wages worth of food?" That's 200 denarii, "and give it to them to eat?" He asked them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And they found they had. And when they found out, they said 5 loaves and 2 fish. So he gave orders to have them sit down in groups on the green grass, indication of the time of year, spring. The people took their places in rows by hundreds and by 50s. Very organized. Then taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he said the blessing, broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. They picked up 12 wicker baskets full of fragments and what was left of the fish. Those who ate of the loaves were 5,000 men, plus women, plus children. So maybe 10,000 people at least, maybe 12,000 people. So the multiplication of the feeding of the 5,000, the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, it's sometimes called. Now, what on earth is going on here? But then he made his disciples get into the boat and precede him to the other side towards Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. And when he had taken leave of them, he went off to the mountain to pray. When it was evening, the boat was far out on the sea, and he was alone on shore. Then he saw that they were tossed about while rowing, for the wind was against them. About the 4th watch of the night, he came towards them, walking on the sea. He meant to pass them by, but when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out. They'd all seen him and were terrified. Once more, the terror, as in the calming of the storm. And at once he spoke with them, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." He got into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely astounded. They had not understood the incident of the loaves. On the contrary, their hearts were hardened. Now that is extraordinary. So we've got 2 miracles, another sort of minor calming of the storm, walking on water, and the feeding of the 5,000, and they had not understood the incident of the loaves. They were completely astounded. On the contrary, their hearts were hardened. It's very strange. Yeah.
So off the back of these, we get John chapter 6.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's mentioned in John chapter 6 as well. It's one of the few bits where the Synoptic Gospel and John chapter 6 come together. Now, what's incredible here is you've got 2 miracles and the responses are 0. So these miracles have failed to elicit any faith. Their hearts were hardened. In other words, it's not simply that they didn't believe, but they were inured to believe. They were inoculated against belief. How could they be so unbelieving, is what he wants to say. Now, even though it's the most astonishing miracle, now the miracle also has got a Eucharistic echo, because it's he taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he said the blessing, broke the bread, and gave it to his disciples. That is a quote from the words of the Mass. So this is not the Mass, but this is a foreshadowing of the Mass. It seems to me. Because those words remind us of the Mass. And so we're being told that the Jesus who feeds the 5,000 will be the Jesus who feeds the faithful, the congregation, at the Eucharist, at the Mass. And incidentally, there is a massive argument back in the day and during the Reformation, and in some parts of the world, the Reformation is still something of a live issue, isn't it? And one of the things that the Protestant reformers of the most extreme kind said that bishops were not willed by Jesus Christ. Dioceses were not willed by Jesus Christ, and they wanted to get rid of all bishops. And this is what they did in Scotland. In Scotland, it was great because they just rounded the bishops up and killed them. And so they got rid of bishops. But they had, in England, they refused to get rid of the bishops because the king wanted the bishops to act as his superintendents to keep an eye on the faithful, to stop them sort of getting too uppity. And so the bishops survived in Anglicanism, but in Presbyterianism they were extirpated root and branch. That was the word they used. And people said bishops are an abomination to be extirpated in root and branch. And the Catholics, of course, believed in bishops, and they had a real big problem because, well, obviously the apostles and so on were the original bishops and so on. But some Catholics came up with this passage and said, well, Jesus had a crowd of 5,000 men, and he divided them up into hundreds and fifties. Doesn't it say that? Hundreds and fifties, for the ease of administration of the loaves. And therefore, the church is divided up into dioceses for the ease of administration, completely in accord with the will of God. As you can see, Jesus pre-shadows the structure of the church in dioceses in this way. A diocese originally was a Roman word which just meant a section. It meant like a county. The emperor, what was the name of this guy? The guy's name? Diocletian was the first person to because originally the Roman Empire was divided into provinces that he divided into smaller bits, which are called dioceses. And who's in charge of this diocese? He would come around and say, you see. And then eventually this was sanctified by the church. The church was also divided into dioceses. Now, a marvelous miracle which gets zero result. They had not understood the incident of the loaves. How stupid can you be? Answer, pretty damn stupid, actually. Now, I think this is quite encouraging because it's also saying to the reader, well, listen, if you don't understand certain things, hang on in there because eventually maybe understanding will come. Or if you are the sort of person who's slow at understanding, you're in good company with St. Peter and the rest of the apostles. I think that's what that means. And again, terror. They were terrified. Why are you terrified in the first thing? This idea of terror, I don't think it means they were worried or they were frightened. It's much worse than that. One of the things that ancient people believed in, and even many people living around the world believe in, is this idea of terror, that you could be sitting in your house and suddenly, it's basically like a very long panic attack. Now, who's had a panic? Oh, don't know. It's all right. Some of you may have had panic attacks, but they generally are quite short, aren't they?
They hang on a bit.
Do they?
I've seen.
It's as a yes. How long does a panic attack go on?
It can take a long time. I've been seeing quite an hour with patients trying to calm them down and it's quite
frightening.
Yeah, for them it is.
Yeah, because it's completely. It is the terror.
Yeah.
So the terror. One of the things is that even in Europe, until a few hundred years ago, there were incidents where you had the whole of society having a panic attack, which went on for about 3 months. And it was called the Great Fear. Have you ever heard of the Great Fear? The Great Fear was something. Have you heard of the Great Fear? Well, it was quite interesting. Just before the French Revolution, there was the Great Fear descended on people. And people would be sitting in their villages saying, the people in the next village are all going to come and murder us. And they said they became terribly, terribly frightened. So they grabbed whatever weapons they had and went and murdered the people in the next village before they could murder them. And so the people in the next village, also terrified, the people in the next village coming to murder us, well, they were right. You see what I mean? And then what happened is that they said the nobles are going to come out of their chateau and punish us and hang us all. So they went to the chateau and they burnt them down. With the nobles often inside. A lot of the nobles had to hightail it out of there. but there was a mass panic throughout France, and it went on for about 3 months. And it was the beginning of this modern phenomenon of fake news. So people would hear terrible rumours about what was going to happen. So and so is marching through France with an army and killing everybody, blah blah blah, and it wasn't true. It also happened in England, I think, in 1830, the Captain Swing riots, where people in the countryside went rioting at the bidding of somebody called Captain Swing, who didn't exist. And so here that they were terrified. The great fear had fallen upon them.
Wasn't there an incident where a whole lot of girls in Japan
Oh God, what happened to them?
on a train, something to do with the train?
Oh, and
they all went into just absolute panic.
Yeah, it does happen. And you also have
30 years.
it does occasionally happen, mass hysteria on an unchanged. And of course, you do have these. I mean, sometimes it's true. The Red Army is in the next village and they're massacring everybody. It's time for us to leave. That was true in Eastern Europe, in Eastern Germany at the time. But quite often these things sort of, get really out of hand. Of course, governments can whip them up, of course, because Goebbels told people, the Red Army are coming and they're going to murder and rape you all, but it turned out to be true. So Goebbels actually was telling the truth but he was certainly winding it up and using it for his own propaganda. But anyway, so the Great Terror had come upon them. Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid. Now, Roman people, according to a very famous historian called Robin Lane Fox, were permanently terrified. And therefore, a Roman person reading this would hear these words, take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid. Jesus Christ is calling us to courage and to put aside our irrational fears. And most fears are fairly irrational. The Roman fear was the fear of death. And Christianity conquered the Roman world quite slowly, but it conquered the Roman world because it offered people an antidote to the fear of death. The fear of death was really quite terrifying for the Romans. And when you read about what they did when somebody died, putting a coin under their tongue so they could pay the ferryman. And if
no,
that's what you do nowadays. To shut their eyes, or used to do. I don't know. With old-fashioned pennies. No, you put an obol, which was a special coin, under the person's tongue so they could pay the ferryman. And if you forgot that, then they would never get across that river. And the other thing is, if you didn't get properly buried, you'd never get across that river either. So the absolute horror of not being buried or not having the coin under your tongue, and the descriptions of the underworld were very depressing. And the bits of the underworld which were supposed to be quite nice, the Elysian fields, were not particularly convincing, whereas the depressing bits were really quite convincing. And so it was not good to be a Roman and think about the end. So that's one of the reasons the Roman had the cult of suicide, because somehow or another you must face up to death. And the best way to do it is to actually kill yourself. Okay, right. Now, courage is designed to not be afraid. What else do we think about this incident of walking on water, the feeding of the 5,000?
What did he mean by he meant to pass by them?
Because Jesus was sort of taking a shortcut across the lake so he could meet them where they got to the other side. Yeah, but he was walking on the water, so that was fine.
I think there's a few things. Certainly the 12 wicker baskets is the 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah, and also the 12 apostles.
Yeah, and also going back to the feeding of the 4,000, and then the 7 wicker baskets.
Yeah,
which is the
they
Canaanite nations that were in the promised land.
Well, this is true. They loved numbers and they loved finding echoes from the past. But the other thing is maybe there were 12 baskets.
But it's all symbolic. Though.
Yeah. Well, I think this really happened. I really do think it happened because it has what it seems to me as a student of literature, it has the ring of truth. This is not an account written by somebody who's made it up.
Also, it's this, so they were terrified.
Yeah, the terror had fallen upon them. Yeah,
and they were completely astounded.
Now, the astounded means it could mean something like their minds were numb.
And then their hearts were hardened. Again, you get sort of
Yeah.
back.
Well, it's water off a duck's back.
It's the same like with Pharaoh.
Yeah. It's well, we never say your heart is hardened. We say it's water off a duck's back. Talking to those children about X, water off a duck's back. They're never going to learn calculus or whatever it is you're trying to teach them. It's water off a duck's back. I keep on telling my son and daughter to do this. Well, doesn't seem to take it in. Water off a duck's back. This lot don't take it in.
But they were terrified.
Yeah.
Astounded,
but they didn't take it in. Well, that's why they were terrified and astounded, because they did not take it in. They did not understand about the power of God. They were still in thrall, enslaved by their fears. Now, I think this is the interesting thing. You've got faith and you've got fear. The two are opposite poles, and the two are at war with each other, with us. What we should ask God is, give us more faith, overcome, not our doubts, overcome our fears, I think. Yeah, I think that's quite a decent insight, actually. I'd never thought about that. Let us overcome our fears. What's that famous scene when an old man is dying and a whole load of people come to talk to him and he's terribly fearful and they try and calm him down? I can't remember. There's some famous scene in literature. Do you know it? No, neither do I. No. And the overcoming of fear is very important. Faith, perfect love casts out fear, says St. John in his letter. So the love of God within faith casts out fear. We're full of fears. When I was a little boy, I was taught by a whole load of horrible men, some of whom would say things to us, you realize you're all going to be incinerated by nuclear bombs. I thought, oh my God, that's bad. And then I remember I said, well, we can't stop the Russians. The British army on the Rhine will be able to make a stand against the Russians probably at the Pyrenees, not before. And the Russians will come over the top. They'll come over the northern part of Norway. They will cut Britain off from the continent, etc., etc. We cannot face the Russians. We are going to be incinerated by the Russians. Did you hear this?
Oh, my mother turned around and said to me that he would kill us first before they got us.
Yeah, that's very good.
And that must have been
so obviously, yeah. And the other thing was, then, did you ever see a film called Thread? You've got to see it. Have you not seen it? It's about bombs falling on Britain and the aftermath of it and the nuclear winter. Threads is one of the most, it's never been shown on television again, but I think it's on YouTube. It's the most terrifying film. Terrifying. And the threads are the ties that bind society together, and they're all going to be dissolved by nuclear war. And you've never seen Threads. I think it came out when I was at university. People say it is one of the greatest things ever made. It's about a nuclear bomb falling on Sheffield. So when I was a little boy, I lived in, a teenager, a society. Threads came out when I was at university. I was about 20. I lived in a society where people were terrified and where the government absolutely terrified because they put out this leaflet, what to do in the event of a nuclear attack.
Like 5-minute warning.
Yeah, so what you do is you wrap yourself in a sheet that has been soaked in urine, which doesn't sound like, and make sure you paper over the windows so you're not blinded by your nuclear flash. And that was not very reassuring, I have to say. And I just thought, well, I just hope that if the bomb falls, I will be killed instantly. because you're going to die within a few weeks. You might as well be killed instantly. We were terrified. And now, the great fear now is of, well, I don't know what the great fear is, but there is a great fear. Well, not possibly we've all become a bit blasé about the great fear, but we certainly weren't in the early 80s.
I think COVID when it first came out.
That was ridiculous, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was ridiculous. We were all told yes, it was very frightening. The very first days of the lockdown were very frightening. That before the lockdown started, when the streets emptied, it was quite frightening. Do you remember? And they told us, they said at any one time, 1/4 of the police will not be able to respond and this, that, and the other because they'll all be in bed with COVID. And if you phone for an ambulance, the ambulance will not come because all the ambulance crew are going to be ill with COVID and so on. That's all.
They did.
Yes, of course they did. It was all untrue, wasn't it?
It was pretty grim in Spain and Italy, though, wasn't it?
It was pretty grim in Spain in Italy when it first started, in the north of Italy. But it certainly wasn't a trivial disease, but it was not as serious as they made out.
But then the Blitz as well, that was terrifying.
Were you in the Blitz? But you took shelter, didn't you?
Yeah.
Remarkably few people were killed in the Blitz.
Thousands were killed.
Yeah, but that was remarkably few from the population of London. A couple of thousand were killed.
There's just been a two-series documentary on the children.
Children.
The fear of the children, hearing this noise.
What was much worse than the Blitz, it seems to me, were the doodlebugs.
Yes.
Those killed more people, and it was terrifying when you hear the engine cut out, and you thought, "Oh my God, is it going to be me?" Yeah, and then you heard it go off in the next room, you say, "Thank God for that, somebody else has got to." Yeah. So the terror, we live in an age of fear. Maybe, I don't know. Do you feel frightened? Do you remember the famous phrase of Arnold Schwarzenegger? The lady says to the child, "Don't be afraid, dear." And Arnold Schwarzenegger, "Yes, be afraid. Be very afraid." Thank God we've got Arnold Schwarzenegger on our side, eh? Right, we have. Anyway, right, let's look over the page. Now, another miracle of the loaves. Now, this is two miracles of the loaves. Do we really need two miracles of the loaves? Is God trying to tell us something by working the same miracle twice? Possibly. In those days, when there again was a great crowd, so it's a second occasion, without anything to eat, he summoned the disciples and said, "My heart is moved with pity for the crowd, because they've been with me now for 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them away hungry to their homes, they will collapse on the way, and some of them have come a great distance." His disciples answered him, "Where can we get enough bread to satisfy them here in this deserted place?" Well, they've just witnessed the feeding of the 5,000 a couple of chapters back, so they should know that, but don't forget their hearts were hardened. So he asked them, "How many loaves do you have?" 7, they replied, thinking, is this a trick question? He ordered the crowd to sit down on the ground, and taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to his disciples to distribute, and they distributed them to the crowd. They also had a few fish. He said the blessing over them, and ordered them distributed also. They ate and were satisfied. They picked up the fragments left over, 7 baskets. There were about 4,000 people. He dismissed them and got into the boat with his disciples and came to the region of Dalmanutha. And it doesn't say anything about how the disciples reacted to this second miracle.
So Dalmanutha is
what? It's a place, yeah.
It's a region beyond Galilee.
I think that these names, like Dalmanutha, would mean nothing to the reader. It's just a name, isn't it? Then he went to Epsom. Where's Epsom? Who cares?
But again, it's the numbers. I think a lot of it is 7.
I think the reason it says he came to the region of Dalmanutha, because in fact he went to the region of Dalmanutha. But the fact that we don't recognise where Dalmanutha is irrelevant.
Is this at the back of the Syrophoenician?
The what?
Syrophoenician woman with her child.
That would be north-west. I think Dalmanutha is east.
Okay.
I think Dalmanutha is roughly where the Golan Heights are now.
Right. Did it take place on the Sea of Galilee?
Yeah, it was on the Sea of Galilee because they went on a boat, and came to the region of Dalmanutha, which I assume is on the right-hand side of the Sea of Galilee. In other words, at the bottom of the Golan Heights. I imagine. Which of course is terribly important nowadays, but I don't think it's particularly important to the reader of the Gospel. I think Nazareth and Jerusalem are obviously important. The Sea of Galilee is important, but quite a lot of the place names mean virtually nothing.
It must have meant something, though.
Well, yes, it did, because that's where he went. And so the guy wrote it down because that's what happened. But it's not particularly significant. We don't hear about Dalmanutha again, do we?
No, that's the first one I've heard.
Yeah, where's Dalmanutha? Who cares? But the point is, he went somewhere, and the place was called Dalmanutha. I mean, like the Decapolis region, the region of the ten towns, which I think is more or less where Dalmanutha is. Now, what this is telling us is, my heart is moved with pity for the crowd. I think that's the key phrase. And this miracle is a miracle of compassion. Feeding the hungry is obviously a good thing to do. And these hungry, they've come all this way just to see me. And therefore, I will make sure that they, when they go home, they won't faint on the way. And the disciples thought, where can anyone get enough bread to satisfy them here in this way? The disciples are not overly compassionate. They want to wash their hands of the crowd. So it's impossible, we can't feed them. And you often hear people say this, for example, in places where's that place? Places where they have, where you have famines. People will say, oh, well, but there's nothing we can do about it, is there? Or so, well, it's too far away, or it's happening for political reasons, which is usually correct, or it's happening because of the bad weather. What can we do about the bad weather? What can we do about the bad government? And when you consider the last time there was a famine in the United Kingdom, 1848, 1846, 1847, 1848, it got steadily worse each year. The people, the government, Lord John Russell, made a big fuss about not doing something. Well, we can't interfere with market forces, he said. And but the previous Prime Minister, Sir Robert Peel, had done something about it. But Lord John Russell refused to do anything. Nature must take its, market forces must reign supreme. Him being a liberal, you see, whereas Peel was a conservative, therefore did believe in state intervention. That's why lots and lots of people died in 1848, whereas not very many people died in 46 or 47. There was also a famine in Scotland and a famine in Wales. But those places, they had better food distribution and so on. Anyway, so the compassion of Jesus. My heart is moved with pity for the crowd. And then we've got this word crowd. And in those days, there was again a great crowd without anything to eat. A lot of people have written about crowds, haven't they? About the significance of the crowd. And the crowd are a group of people who have got no fixed purpose and no joint purpose. When they get a joint purpose, they turn into a mob, which of course is most people are really terrified of. Football hooligans have a joint purpose, they're a mob. But the point is they can have a joint purpose and be turned into a congregation. That's the key thing. So is this crowd going to move into being a mob, or is it going to be moving into being a congregation? And Jesus says he took the loaves, he gave thanks, he broke them, and he gave them to his disciples to distribute. So in that they're all fed from the hands of Jesus directly, they become united in that they all eat the one bread, which has come from Jesus. Seems to me. What do you think? Does the first miracle of the loaves mention crowd? No, it doesn't use the word crowd. The people, it says, took their places in rows by hundreds and by fifties. It does not use the word crowd.
It does.
Where?
Just then he made it.
Oh, yes, he dismissed the crowd. He dismissed the crowd. Yes, the multitude, the crowd. Yeah, it does. But it doesn't make such. My heart is moved with pity for the crowd. One of the things about the ancient Romans, when they had crowds, they despised the crowds. They kept the crowds happy with bread and circuses, but they despised and feared the crowd. Jesus feels pity for the crowd. Which
Did
I
they
think,
feel they were more superior?
who?
The disciples, did they feel there's
Maybe they did, yes. And they said, well, where can anyone get it?
they were chosen and they didn't want to
Yeah.
mix with anybody?
Maybe. Don't forget, the people who despised the crowd a great deal were the Pharisees. In the Gospel of St. John, it says, what does this rabble know? They are damned. Because the rabble, the crowd, were not keeping the law properly. Because, as you know, to keep the law, you really do have to have a proper house and lots of, well, not lots of servants, but you have to have a lot of free time. And if you were a working person, you really weren't able to be totally kosher, as we now call it. You weren't able to be a perfect practitioner of the law. And similarly, you weren't able to spend your entire time studying the law, which is what the Pharisees were doing. So there we are. Now, we've got a few more minutes. Let's look at the last one, the transfiguration of Jesus, which happens halfway through the Gospel, chapter 9, verses 1 to 8. He also said to them, Amen, I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see that the kingdom of God has come in power. So he says, some of you here will one day, you will see Christians everywhere. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John. And actually, what he's saying is, there are some of you standing here, 3 of you in particular, and you will see the kingdom of God has come in power. You're going to witness transfiguration, possibly. But it could also mean you're going to witness the spread of the church. After 6 days, he took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain, apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no fuller on earth could bleach them. Then Elijah appeared to them, along with Moses, and they were conversing with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. He hardly knew what to say. He was so terrified. Terrified again, but this time it's holy terror. Then a cloud came, casting a shadow over them. Then from the cloud, which is traditionally the glory of God, came a voice. This is my beloved son, listen to him. Suddenly, looking round, they no longer saw anyone but Jesus alone with them. So they go up this mountain and they have a mystical experience. They see Jesus in glory with Elijah and Moses. How were they able to recognize Elijah and Moses? I don't know. But part of the mystical experiences, they recognized Elijah and Moses. And they were conversing with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it's good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. Let us make this a permanent place for the 3 of you to be on the top of the mountain. And then the cloud comes and Jesus is, the voice of the Father is heard, and then suddenly it's all over. And then they have to go down the mountain. They want to stay on the mountain. It says, it is good that we are here. But this experience on the mountain is going to be a very short experience. It's going to be a very transient experience. They will have to leave the mountain. But hopefully they will remember the experience. And I suppose many souls experience moments of enlightenment, and then that moment of enlightenment passes and it's back to daily life. What we must do is constantly look for the moments of such experiences and such, what's the word I'm looking for, enlightenment, and hold on to those experiences, even though we can't hold on to them, but try and remember them and allow the light that we've gained in those moments to illuminate the whole of our lives. What do you make of the transfiguration of Jesus? I'm getting a sore throat.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone thinks that people, is confused. When he said let's make 3 tents, it goes back to the tent of meeting, doesn't it? And
To what?
The tent of meeting and the big
Yeah.
So,
The tabernacle. Yeah. Let's make 3 tabernacles. It could have been a tabernaculum and a tent, the same thing.
So it's quite. So Peter knew what was going on. He
Yeah.
knew that it was, and I mean, is it in the other gospel? Is it in Luke?
It's in all 3 of the gospels.
It just precedes the entry into Jerusalem, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, the journey to Jerusalem, and it precedes the prediction of the Passion.
So it's almost strengthened them to see Christ glorified.
I think it's, we want to make tents, and we want to, what's the word I'm looking for, make permanent the fleeting moment, but we can't.
It's also, I'm getting sort of a bit like, after resurrection with Mary Magdalene.
Yes.
She holds on to him.
Yes.
And he says, do not hold on to him.
Yeah.
So it's like he's sending her on mission as well.
I think,
hold on to me.
Yeah. And here it's saying, you want to make 3 tents, but you can't. I think it's almost a criticism of the fetishization that the people of Jesus' time made of the temple. The temple, Jesus predicts, is going to be destroyed. And what he's saying, you are going to have to live without the temple. And that, obviously, to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, is, what's the word I'm looking for, is unimaginable.
It's sacrilegious, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, no, you can't live without a temple, but God is asking us to live without a temple. Don't forget, the Jews lived without a temple until the time of Solomon.
Yeah.
And they had a tabernacle which was mobile.
Mm-hmm.
So it's asking us to don't put down too many roots, but be prepared to move on. I'll think. What do you think? Yes.
Yeah.
It is obviously a mystical experience that actually happened. Because again, nobody could write this. Nobody could make this up. You simply could not make this up.
Could the voice come to say?
They heard a voice in prayer, maybe.
There's a cloud of glory.
Yeah, the cloud of glory. This is my beloved son, listen to him. They heard a voice. They saw a vision. They heard a voice. Saint Bernadette saw a vision and heard voices. Usually when people say, I'm seeing things and hearing voices, you think, oh dear. But sometimes they are genuine religious experiences, the hearing of voices. There's quite a lot of discussion about Joan of Arc, who heard voices and had visions. And some people said, oh, the poor girl was simply schizophrenic. And some people insist that she was a schizophrenic. In those days, others said, oh no, she's a witch. She's been listening to the devil. She's been listening to demons. And other people said, no, she was listening to the voices of the saints and the voice of God and so on. But she was a seer and a hearer of voices. Nowadays, if someone says, I hear voices in my head, you need to be very worried. Usually. But, maybe there are people who are hearing, having what are called divine allocutions or whatever and so forth. And they were hearing voices. The voice that they heard was in their head, I'm sure about that. And the vision they saw was on their retinas. But it was in the eye of the beholder rather than sort of maybe...
Also, what you see with Elijah and Moses is Christ the fulfillment of...
Yes, but I wouldn't want to fillet this too much and dig out of its allegorical meaning and things like that. For me, it's just a story which tells us a truth, and we've got to understand the story as a work of literature rather than a treatise of theology.
It's got one of them King David and Ezekiel.
Yeah, I mean, it's Moses and Elijah. Because Moses and Elijah are more important than King David and Ezekiel. I think we must stop. We've been going on for an hour. Does it feel like more than?
That's good.
Okay. We'll carry on next week. All the best, everybody. And now I'm going to